Hey there, welcome to Embracing New Life, the podcast where we explore the intersection of mental health and the church. This week, we dive into the third of this four-part series called Debunking Myths 2.0, Challenging the Beliefs Christians Hold About Counseling. In this series, we are continuing to dive into 18 common myths that Dr. Dan Green has encountered throughout his decades in the counseling profession. Whether you're a believer, a skeptic, or somewhere in between, join us as we uncover the truths behind these misconceptions. You know what time it is. Grab your favorite beverage, find a comfortable spot, and sit back and relax. Or, if you prefer, take a salon on your walk or while you get things done. Either way, let's dive into today's episode. Myth number 9 is psychology worships the self, with self-esteem as the primary goal.
And to that, I would suggest that is a truth of our culture. That is a truth of many in the church.
Yeah.
Different types of health and wealth theologies essentially have that as their value. So a Christian psychologist or a Christian counselor is going to have that influence because we all do. We swim in that water in this culture.
Yep.
But the research shows self-indulgence is destructive. And that contentment does not come from self-indulgence. Happiness does not come from self-indulgence. Now, how ought we think about the self? That's a challenge. For some, they think that devaluing the self is a godly thing. I've shared with people, tongue-in-cheek in my office, that I'm really glad that they don't live out Matthew 22, that they don't love me as they love themselves, because I'd probably have to call the police. As harsh as they are on themselves, they see that as a good thing.
Yeah, yep.
My understanding of scriptures is that that we are to treat others as we treat ourselves. We are to treat ourselves as we treat others, and that from that secure place, to submit to others is to basically say, I'm in a good spot, and I want you to go first.
Yeah.
Very different than I'm unlovable and you're superior to me, or we're all worms.
Yeah. And this, once again, is where, Christian theology becomes paramount in the room because, man, to understand that we are image bearers of God is not to puff ourselves up, because that very well could for some people, but it's just to recognize that that's just how God has designed it in His creation.
Yes.
And, who are we to say any different? We're not God. But to understand that at a very base level and live from that is so necessary.
And that the appropriate self-esteem is realistic description of who I am.
Yeah.
I see this in Galatians 6. It's a fascinating passage that we're to bear one another's burdens. We're not, in verse 3, we're not to deceive ourselves and build ourselves up as something that we're not. But then verse 4 and 5 are real important. Test your own actions. Have pride in yourself without comparing yourself to anyone else.
Yeah.
For we each carry our own load. And that idea of see yourself realistically, when we do that, you'll feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
So if I'm under self-condemnation or self-devaluing, what am I missing that's letting me have this false picture of me? I'm loved by the creator and sustainer of the universe. Now, how do I make that real in my experience?
Yeah.
What do I got to get rid of to let myself experience being loved and being in that good place?
Yeah, because it's from a healthier self-esteem that we have the capacity to really, truly love God and love others well,
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Myth number 10. Christian counselors overemphasize emotions as if feelings are the most important aspect of life.
I've got a theory. Can't prove it. But my theory is that before the fall, the human being did not talk about, I'm thinking this, but I feel this way. Oh, I got this conflict with my thoughts and my feelings. My theory is that before the fall, thought and feeling was experienced by the human as processing, living in the moment, experiencing reality right now.
Yeah.
And that when the fall occurred, those things that were designed to be together got ripped apart. People from God, man from woman, people from environment.
Yep.
And I think we got ripped apart inside too.
Yep.
We need the different types of processing to get the whole picture. Sometimes I think about emotion, which is a very physical signal system. Emotions direct our attention, they motivate us, they vary in intensity, they modulate our energy. Some emotions we are more energized, some emotions it's like the batteries are taken out and we have very little energy. They need to be congruent together with our thinking. We could think about thinking as like the steering wheel on a car. Thinking points us in the direction, makes all the little adjustments. Emotion is like the accelerator and the brake. When I was a little kid, when my dad would get out of the car, I'd climb up into his seat and pretend I was driving the car. And I'd make noises and my feet didn't touch the pedals, etc. That was great.
Yeah.
Fun, but I went nowhere.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people think that's how we should operate. We should only think.
Yeah.
But we need our emotion to give us the rest of the picture and to give us motivation.
Yep.
And to give us the capacity to be responsive. If I only think, I don't go anywhere.
Yeah. Do you think the overemphasis of logic is a byproduct of modernistic thinking then? Because, in modernism they elevated logical thought, as the pinnacle of the human experience, and yet it undervalues what we've already talked about with sin, permeating the world and everything being impacted, not just emotion, but also logic.
Well, it really elevated thought over the body. It is almost as if the incarnation is irrelevant. God becoming a human amongst us. We don't need bodies.
Yeah.
All we need is a frontal cortex.
Yeah.
And that is not how we're designed.
Yeah.
And so when we're only in the valuing of our thought processes, we have nothing to check our thoughts against.
Yeah.
And some of our thoughts can get pretty far out there.
For sure. It's almost like N.T. Wright will say, it's a return to Gnosticism,
Yes.
where it's an undervaluing of the bodily, tangible, created world and an elevation of the spiritual.
Right. We are so much more than a computing device.
Yeah. Yep.
Quick little story. Early in my career, I worked with a woman who had been working in a major city in a high-rise. The parking deck was the first floors of this skyscraper. And she was told, or the whole company was told, there's been an assailant in the parking lots. Do not go to your car after hours unless you're accompanied by security guards. This is a very competitive world she was living in this business environment. She saw some of her male colleagues went out after hours without a security guard, and she determined, well, if they can do it, then I'm going to do it. Tragically, the assailant was not interested in attacking men. He only wanted to attack a woman. And she was brutally assaulted and left for dead. When I saw her, she was in the hospital in a neurological unit. And what became evident is she had been very afraid to go out there by herself. But she'd been taught that you can't trust your emotions. You've got to trust your thoughts. And her thoughts told her, well, if he can do it, I can do it. But all the information her fear was giving her was devalued, and she didn't take the precautions that she had actually been instructed to take.
Yeah.
We need both thinking and feeling to check each other. That each contributes to our understanding of what's good and right.
Yeah. And how to live in this world.
Yes.
All right. Good stuff. Myth number 11. All people who do Christian counseling are the same.
Well, in this room, we have a sample of 2 Christian counselors. And there's many things that we do similar, and yet there are so many ways that we do it different.
Yeah, for sure.
Because in a counseling role, we're not applying a mold that we force a person in.
Mm-hmm.
We're relating to the uniqueness of that person from the uniqueness of me.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I share when I'm working with people in their training is what you bring into that consulting room is you. It's not just your training, and it's not just the instructions that I, as your supervisor, might give you. Not at all. You're bringing in all of you in relationship with the other.
Yeah.
Thus, every counselor is different.
Yeah, exactly. And do you want to speak to the fact that, in the literature it shows that the therapeutic relationship is one of the greatest indicators of change, or however you want to say it?
In the psychotherapy outcome literature, they're looking at what is the element that accounts for positive change.
Yeah.
And actually, early in my career, I was involved in a study. Multiple universities were involved, and looking at all the different components of treatment. Very sophisticated study. And it was disappointing when, after all this work had been done to test all these different things, therapeutic relationship accounted for the greatest amount of change. The relationship that counselee, that they have of trust and of ability to be vulnerable together in working towards the good of the counselee, is a very active agent of change.
Yeah. And the fact that we are all different is probably why it's so effective, beyond just, knowing and being known and acceptance. But, that fact that everybody is different, no matter if you're a counselor or not, and just connecting in an authentic, healthy way, just demonstrates the power of that.
Because one of the features here that's important to consider, our deepest needs are to love and be loved, to know and be known. And that is a factor of a helping relationship. In the helping relationship, the safety exists so that the counselee can be understood, so they can share themselves, so they can express and receive.
Mm-hmm.
And that facilitates the change because our deep needs are being addressed.
Yeah, that's great. Myth number 12 is once people begin counseling, they will never quit.
There's so much variability on how long people are in counseling.
Yeah.
There are some people that attend a few times. The need is addressed well.
Yeah.
They are satisfied, content, and it's mutually agreed. We're done with what we set out to do. Well done.
Yeah.
There are other times that it goes longer. There are some scenarios that are quite chronic. I shared with you my eyesight. I have an exam coming up. I have been going back to an ophthalmologist for decades. Never quit. Why? Well, I have a chronic need that continually needs to be assessed and something done with it.
Yeah.
For some people, they are in for a long time.
Yeah.
Their needs are such.
Yep.
That's not the majority by any means. Most people are in a counseling relationship a couple of months to a number of months. Then another group is up to 18 months. So there's a lot of variability on this, depending on the needs of the person involved.
Yeah. And even where they find themselves currently in life, right? So could be a season that's really tough, that they need a lot of help, and then maybe they check in once a year like you would with your doctor, just to make sure that everything's still on a good course.
Yeah, and there are people that I worked with maybe in one scenario in one phase of life, Number of years later, we do something again. Number of years later, something again. And one of the blessings I've had, having the length of career that I've had, is just to see these people's lives continue to develop and have a place in their overall life journey.
Yep. Yeah, I think another question that often gets asked on the heels of this one is like frequency, right? And, how frequently, once you begin counseling, is it just you have to do it weekly? Or, what does that look like?
Yeah. Back in the Freudian days, it was 2 hours, 5 days a week.
Oh, wow.
Now, I've never met a person who's done that, but that's how it started.
Yeah.
What is typical in our situation is to begin a process, I recommend trying to meet either weekly or every other week to get started so that we don't reacquaint ourselves each time we meet.
Sure.
But we build a relationship. And after a brief period of time, we're assessing, continually assessing what would be helpful here? What is going to bring good in this particular situation? So we might continue weekly. We might continue or space it out every 2, every 3. As people are reaching their goals, we might space it out further. There's someone just recently I met with. We're going to meet again in 3 months to see how things are going, and then likely identify that we've reached all our goals. Now, sometimes, as a person's life journey continues, rather than things improving in their life, things get more complicated.
Yeah.
And they might have some type of medical collapse. They might have incredible addition of stressors, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Sometimes we up the frequency to facilitate what's needed for a period of time to reestablish a stable, safe way of living. There are times where we might need to recommend a more intense type of treatment than just meeting in an outpatient, maybe a day program, or even sometimes a hospitalization for a brief time. Always looking at what does the person need to live well.
Yeah. And in collaboration with them, right? So
in collaboration with them, right.
Yeah, so they have an active part in making those decisions. And although you may have a recommendation for them, they have agency to do
absolutely
what they're going to do.
Yes.
Yep. Thanks for joining us this week for Debunking Myths 2.0, challenging the beliefs Christians hold about counseling. Make sure to follow Embracing New Life and turn on your notifications so you'll be alerted when our next episode drops on Monday. Embracing New Life is a production of New Life Resources, a Christian counseling clinic in southeast Wisconsin, whose aim and goal since 1976 has been to provide high-quality professional counseling, psychological, and consulting services from within a Christian framework.